When you get ready to make a new garden area, you'll want to measure and mark the location. You can use a tape measure to mark out a square space, or lay down a hose to get a desired curve. Then make the space by dropping lime, sand, or flour along the edges for a temporary line that'll wash away. You can also use spray paint, preferably something greenish to blend in, or use pin flags to mark the edges of your new garden location. In most situations, you'll have some type of vegetation to get rid of in your garden. Most often, this is lawn and either grass or a combination of grass and other weeds. There are 4 options to getting rid of existing vegetation: dig, till, smother, or poison. Digging out sod or plants is a straightforward way to get rid of vegetation. It's cheap because it only requires a spade or shovel. It's relatively fast because it allows you to remove the current vegetation and then begin directly working to prepare the soil for planting. It's also effective at getting rid of competitive plants because you're physically removing them from the site. The major downside to this method is that it's labor intensive. It requires an investment of time and muscle to get the job done. If your new garden area is in a lawn, use a spade or square-ended shovel or edger to make vertical cuts along the edges of your new garden area. Then use the spade to outline a narrow strip of grass along one edge. Once you've cut along all the edges, you'll cut smaller squares. Then you'll slide your spade underneath the sod and lift it out of the yard. Shake off any loose soil and then place the old grass in a compost pile. Tilling is another fast way to prepare a new garden bed, and it takes much less energy than digging out your soil. With tilling, you begin to prepare your soil and you'll be able to plant not long afterward. It's a fast method, and if you don't have a tiller, you may be able to borrow one from a friend or rent one from a local business. Another benefit is that you retain the organic matter and nutrients that were in the previous vegetation, which can help improve your soils. One potential downside of tilling is that the method just grinds up the vegetation that you previously had on site. If you do an incomplete job of tilling the material to a pulp, or if the previous vegetation has a strong ability to grow from roots and rhizomes, these weeds may come back. By disturbing the soil, you may also be exposing weed seeds that have been buried in the soil to the sun and air, allowing them to grow as well. As tempting as it is to plant directly into a newly tilled bed, you'll benefit in the long run if you take extra time to remove any root pieces from the soil. Allow the tilled area to sit a week or 2 so that the weeds have the opportunity to come back, then weed thoroughly or till the soil again before planting. Smothering an area to get rid of vegetation is extremely easy and cheap. All you have to do is mow any existing vegetation as low to the ground as possible. Then cover the area with cardboard or with several layers of newspaper, preferably without color ink. Water the area well and then cover the entire area with soil, mulch, or a tarp to keep everything from blowing away. The major downside of this method is that it'll take most of a growing season for the grass to be killed in the area. This means that covering an area in spring will allow for a fall planting, or covering an area in mid to late summer will allow for planting the following spring. A variation of this method is called sheet composting, or lasagna gardening. In this method, several layers of grass, mulch, leaves, or other compost materials are layered 1 to 2 feet tall on top of the cardboard. These materials will quickly compost and settle to a lower height. Plants can be planted into the soil or into the compost layer sooner with this method because the addition of compost further reduces competition from the grass or plants below. Herbicides can also be sprayed in your desired garden area to kill vegetation. This method is fast and effective at killing plants. It's not particularly labor intensive, although it's not necessarily easy either. The herbicide needs to be matched to the type of vegetation that's being killed, and many safety precautions need to be followed in order to reduce risks from these chemicals on people and on the environment. For that reason, using herbicides to establish a new garden area would be most suitable to those with experience using chemical herbicides. Once you have your new garden area free of unwanted vegetation, you're ready to begin preparing the soils. Soils are covered in more detail in a later section.